So we're going to be talking about the Simple Annotation Server, and I'm going to start with a background of really how it developed and some of the kind of thinking behind how we developed it. And then Ben's going to give an update with the latest developments and talk about how he's using it in the METAscripta project. So the Simple Annotation Server, it's available on GitHub, free to use. As you'd expect, called an annotation server, it's an annotation server that works with Mirador to capture annotations, and as Mirador works with IIIF material, it works with both Mirador for capturing annotations, and it also allows searching through the universal viewer. It was developed back in 2015 when I worked at the National Library of Wales, and the main use case for that was for supporting a volunteer project called the Book of Remembrance, which was asking volunteers to transcribe names in the Book of Remembrance around the time of the centenary of the end of World War I. So it was developed for this use case. We had a customized version of Mirador, and we needed an annotation server on the back end to be able to store the annotations as the volunteers were making them. We also wanted to support search. So this is one of the unique features of the Simple Annotation Server, is the capability to support both annotations, but also the IIIF search API. So this is an example of doing a search of the content that I previously just annotated, and you can search for it straight away using the universal viewer. And so when we did this at the National Library of Wales, it meant that the volunteers could be transcribing the book. And as they were transcribing, more and more of the annotations were available to the public. And the public were using the universal viewer to display the content, whereas the volunteers were using Mirador to do the annotation. And it really kind of shows the power of IIIF and annotations. Another one of the unique features of the Simple Annotation Server was we treated the annotations as linked open data. So we natively stored it in a linked open database, linked open data database, which means you can do really powerful querying. So in this project with the Book of Remembrance, a list of names of Welsh soldiers who fought and gave their lives during the First World War, and as well as their names and the regiment they served under. It also gave a location for where they were kind of known to come from. And because it was, we captured the data in a linked data friendly way, and because the annotations are stored in a linked data store, we could generate and extract all of the place names that were mentioned in over 1,000 pages in this Book of Remembrance. And so I've taken those names and I've put them on a map to see a heat map of where people are most mentioned. And you can see this as a result, and it's quite interesting that it maps to the modern population centre of Wales. So I'm on the coast here in Aberystwyth, and you can see there's quite low density of people there. But if you go to the south of Wales, where there's more people, especially Cardiff, the capital city, there's a higher population. And it was a really interesting way of being able to take all of this data out of this kind of rather large book of names and really try and uncover the stories behind the data. And that was kind of the power of treating these annotations as linked data. So to do this, we supported a number of backends to the Simple Annotation Server. So the way it kind of works is that we've got Mirador on the front end, which sends the annotations to a Java web application. And then you have a choice of backends on where you want to store these annotations. So the first one we developed was Jenna, which is a linked data database. Then we quickly moved to Sesame because it had a better front end. And then when we started implementing the search API, we wanted a database that was more focused on presenting search results. And so we went with Solr. And then more recently, with working with Ben, we now support Elasticsearch. So the Simple Annotation Server at the moment can support all of these different backends, and it's a choice on install about which one you install. We also wanted to keep this idea of a simple install. So if you're an independent researcher and you wanted to have a go with the annotation server, then we wanted to make it as simple to install as possible. So if you go to this website to GitHub, you can download a jar version of the Simple Annotation Server. And that includes a copy of Mirador and a copy of the Java web application. I've shown a screenshot here of the Book of Remembrance customized Mirador, And we store that in this one-click download as an example, but we also have the kind of out-of-the-box Mirador 2 available in that package. And that uses the Jenna linked open database to store just on your local file system. And we use this as part of the training. And if you want to go to this URL, there's some full details about how to install the Simple Annotation Server locally. But from funding from the METAscripta project and Ben and others, and as part of the training, the IIIF training, we wanted to have a Simple Annotation Server that was hosted in the cloud so we could share it with the students, and so they didn't have to go ahead and install the server themselves. They could use the one we provided. So we do run a copy of this in the cloud. As I mentioned, this is partly funded by METAscripta. And this one, we've got a hosted version of Mirador, again, the same Java web application. And also in the back end for the cloud is Elasticsearch, as that seems to have the best support in AWS web services. And we've set up this kind of automatic deployment process. So both I've got a copy of this for the training and Ben has a copy of this for METAscripta, where we have a copy of Simple Annotation Server running on GitHub. And then when we make a change to a certain branch on the GitHub, it automatically pushes it to deploy to the AWS web servers. Using the code pipeline, Amazon ECS to create a Docker instance. It sets up the Elastic search service, and then it uses an Elastic load balancer to be able to cope with the demand. We do have documentation for this that's available. We don't make it hugely public because the AWS change their configuration quite often, and so it's very difficult to keep it up to date. But if you are interested, I can send it to you. And just to give you an idea of the costs, so this is the cost that METAscripta are paying for running the Simple Annotation Server in the cloud. So it works out about $40 a month to be able to host it. And that includes the Elastic container service, the Docker instances, and also the Elasticsearch service that drives the Simple Annotation Server. I mentioned that we use this for training. So we mostly use the hosted version for the training, and we cover lots of different topics in the training. So we have a simple kind of demonstration about how the annotation functionality works with Mirador. We look at saving and linking annotation lists to manifest. So once you've made your annotations, you download them and then you link them to a copy of the manifest. And then you're able to publish that manifest and the annotations kind of come with it so you can share it with other people. We also demonstrate the IIIF search API and show how to add that to a manifest. And then we also demonstrate how you can publish your annotations maybe in a classroom setting using a Noah from Nikki O'Neill from the NC State libraries. And if you look at the IIIF training, the annotation section covers all of those details. And then the latest round of funding from METAscripta, we've looked at adding authentication to the Simple Annotation Server. So up until this point, there's only been a single user who's able to annotate, and you're able to edit other people's annotations. But one of the things that Deborah wanted and Ben wanted was this kind of individual annotation functionality. So that's something that we've added. And this has given rise to a lot more functions that we can now add. So users can create folders and store manifests. You can display a IIIF icon, so a collection of the manifests that you've gathered. We've added the ability to customize the theme, so it'll look slightly different with METAscripta. And we've also played around with content state and seeing different ways that we can allow people to share annotations and manifests between systems. So this is my last slide, and I'll just show you that Ben's going to show you most of the new features, but this is a bit which took most of the work. So when you go to this new version of the Simple Annotation Server, the first thing it asks you is how you'd like to log in. And we've used open authentication at OAuth. So we're providing sign in with Google, sign in with GitHub, or sign in with METAscripta, which is the WordPress version that they're using in METAscripta. So I'll pass over to Ben.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Glenn. Yes, so for our implementation, we funded the development of the ability, right, to have private accounts. And so in terms of user accounts, we decided to build a WordPress site and just enable a simple OAuth plugin so that we could bring people in to understand what does this tool do, and then easily allow them to register, and also for whoever is administering the user accounts to log into WordPress and reset passwords and things like that. So that's why we chose WordPress for that. Next slide, please. So before these developments, you launched Simple Annotation Server, and you were right inside the Mirador UI, and you worked out of that. And so if you go to the next slide, what we did is we just pulled that out to the web interface. We wanted people to be able to construct their collections and manage them outside of Mirador. So, but actually Mirador reflects the same collection inside its UI through some nice coding that Glen did. So when you make a folder, you add your manifests, automatically it can be accessible as a collection. So when I saw the presentation about Exhibit, that was exciting that they accept a IIIF collection as an import function. So that's a great kind of tie-in right there. Next slide, please. Right. So all you have to do is click Add Item to add your manifest. Next slide. Right. Forgot that I had all these broken out. So you can easily add a new collection. And I think we currently don't have the ability to rename a collection, but that's coming in the next round of development. So this can be used for various purposes. And right, so I go ahead to the next slide. This was just illustrating that whatever that collection is that you build inside the web interface, it's mirrored inside Mirador, which is familiar to a lot of people. Next slide. Right, so it does require Mirador 3 or Universal 3 to display a collection, but that's gonna, seems like more and more tools are gonna start using collections such as Exhibit. Next slide. Oh, right. So the purpose of having this account and having these collections is to jump into your manifest and create annotations. So if you choose the edit button there, next slide. Right. So we have 3 example use cases to show you. We only just finished this in the past couple months, so we're in the early stages of live use. So in this case, Deborah imported one manuscript from St. Louis University and one from the Vatican Library, and is creating annotations that are comparing. I think one thing that we wanted to eventually enable that we haven't done yet is the ability to launch, save that view and relaunch it instead of rebuilding it each time. Next slide, please. Okay, so this past semester, we had a professor at Eastern New Mexico University use it for a class assignment. And so they preloaded an account with a folder with a manuscript inside it, told students to log in and go to it. And then their task was to identify a Latin word, translate it into English, and attach an image of the word. Next slide. And we've recently been reaching out to people in the community, scholars who have a need to create annotations and don't currently have a tool to do so. And so here's an example from Farah Altiero at the Illuminated Dante project, working to understand if the copyist of this manuscript is the same one who did, produce these 20 other copies of things. So that'll be familiar to anyone who's used Mirador before, but this allows you to do it yourself. Next slide. So what we have planned coming up is, number one, the ability to browse annotations visually. Just like you can browse the manifest, in the new version, you'll click into the manifest and you'll see all of your annotations in, I think, a thumbnail view, if that's right, Glen. It's our intention. Beyond that, we want the ability to share these annotations publicly. So if you've worked on a particular manuscript, or maybe you've done a homework assignment, right? Get that link so that even though it's inside your account, someone else can view it. A couple other back-end things. I think an admin view to get more insight into what's happening. So if this was, for instance, implemented by another project or an institution, you would want the ability to see how many users you have, what kind of activity they're doing. I think support for Mirador 3 is coming, and a couple of usability and UX improvements. And that's on the agenda for this summer, actually. Next slide. Right, so just looking ahead and thinking about potential use cases, I would love to hear from other people about some other use cases you can imagine. Thinking again about the exhibit presentation that was given yesterday. They allow direct import of a IIIF collection. Students can share an annotated manuscript with the professor. Scholars might share ongoing research with peers that's maybe not yet published. What are some of those other use cases? And how useful do you think this is? And are there other useful directions that we might look towards? So let me check the Whova app, see if I can see any. Can you leave any questions in chat? I don't see any currently.
It looks like there's one if you click on Q&A. Some folks have put them in there, actually.
Oh, it was
that little top menu.
Yep. SAS is compatible with Mirador 3. If not currently, it will be after this next round. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, so there's a couple of people that have made a plugin to make Simple Annotation Server Support 3. I don't know if they're on this call, but they've done some great work kind of plugging the existing Simple Annotation Server with Mirador 3. And it does work, and I'm going to look at taking their plugin that they developed and bring it into Simple Annotation Server. So at this moment in time, if you download Simple Annotation Server, you'll get Mirador 2, although you can install this plugin into Mirador 3 to make it work with Simple Annotation Server. Also, because Mirador 3 is backwards compatible, all of the annotations that you create in Simple Annotation Server will work in Mirador 3. The extra functionality we're going to look at over the summer is between version 2 and version 3, the annotation format changed. And so in version 3, they use something called web annotations. And I'd like to support that natively in the Simple Annotation Server. But that's currently not possible. So there are ways to use Mirador 3 at the moment, and we're hoping to make it even better supported over the summer.
I see a question from Sally. Complex queries of annotations. So that's an interesting idea. And I'm curious if Glenn or anyone here has seen an example of an annotation query tool other than search, right? But like that's Google style search.
So the way we did this, looking back at the Book of Remembrance, was to capture the data that we wanted to query as linked open data. I've got some examples on the training looking at the annotation we created. So we created it in RDFA, which is kind of linked data hidden in an annotation. And being able to do it that way meant that we could take the data into a linked data database and do any sort of queries that we wanted. So it is possible in that kind of bespoke way. And the IIIF search API is very much about kind of a general search within, so it wouldn't be able to do this kind of complex searching. But if you can convert the annotation into linked open data, then you can definitely do really complicated searching.
Looks like, are we out of time, Meg?
Yeah, but Glenn, unless you're presenting at one of the next sessions, you could, if I leave, you could probably answer that last question and be fine.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay.
Okay, so I'll hop off and you can keep up.
Great.
Answering questions. All right, thanks all.
So should we go on to Ben's one?
Yep, Mhm.
So have you considered other annotation stores? Elucidate has had authentication for a while, I believe. Yes, so Simple Annotation Server is definitely one of the annotation servers that are available for IIIF. And if you look at the IIIF awesome list, there are a number available. Elucidate is great. That one uses Postgres as a backend. And I think it does, I'm quite sure it does authentication. It's a good annotation server. It doesn't support the it doesn't support the search API. Digerati have a separate tool for that. There's also another one from Nicky O'Neill more recently, which is based on an annotation server on with a backend on GitHub, and that's a really interesting one. So we're definitely looking at all the features of different annotation servers, and some will have benefits over the others.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so just want to thank everyone for attending, and please let us know if you have any other suggestions.
Thanks all.